I'm going to say something I didn't expect to say today. Don't worry, Jets fans. You go into a Thursday night football game. Didn't love the matchup. Think the Niners are really good. Don't really like the Giants. Deep down, think they were a little fluky last year. Have major questions about Daniel Jones, which I think are entirely fair. And I thought San Francisco would win. Thought it was a pretty bad matchup, especially when you look at the O-line problems for the Giants, and they won. All right, fine. They ran away from it at the end. I want you to understand that this next statement is based on expectations. I think Daniel Jones might be okay. Great, no. Good, no. Average, maybe. And the fact that I'm even open to that is kind of where I landed last night after watching the game. We'll get to San Francisco and Purdy. Yeah, I know they won, but this is just what I want to do. So, as I've explained far too many times, as much as I love college football, when the quarterbacks get drafted, it's a massive landscape of shrugs for me. I thought Andrew Luck would be awesome. He was really good. There's a bunch of other guys that I thought would stink that stunk, and there was also some guys I didn't think were going to be any good that were good, right? That happens. And then in the middle, other than the extremes of no chance to he should be good, there's this island of quarterbacks where I'm like, I just have no idea. I have none. The Daniel Jones resume going in and being picked that high by the Giants, it felt a little risky. It didn't look like he was the answer going into last year, but with Daboll and the offensive staff, it felt like it was good enough. But you can kind of dig into it and be like, was it really? For the first few seasons, it looked pretty bad. He had, let's see here, 29 picks in the first 3 years. His fumble situation was brutal. I've gone back and looked at like the fumbles and fumbles lost, the whole deal. There's like 20 lost fumbles over that 3-year period, 19 total fumbles his first year. I've seen 18. The fumble numbers are actually kind of weird when you go back and look at it historically because different sites will have different places. We just know that he fumbled a lot, and he lost a lot of those as well. He still hasn't had 20 passing touchdowns in a season other than his rookie year. But last season was his best QBR year. There's a bit of a number two that you can go, well, the QBR stuff's good, but he had only 15 touchdowns. Like, that's weird to think of it again. You're like, wait, Daniel Jones basically started the entire year, played 16 to 17 games, and he had 15 total touchdowns in today's NFL. Like, how does that stack up? Well, it doesn't stack up well. The only other quarterback that played 16 games that had less than 15 touchdowns was Taysom Hill. He didn't really even play quarterback. So you get the point. That's not a great number. But last year at least provided us a little bit of hope. But then going into this year, Cowboys debacle, everybody gets a C. They look terrible. First half against Arizona, we're counted off as 6 quarters to start the season without any points. And then he lights it up against a bad Arizona team. The comeback, and my take for that on Monday was essentially like he gets to avoid all the doubt until the next bad game. And a lot of that is happening with him today. So why would I be saying that he might be okay? Last night was brutal for any quarterback. Left tackle's out, left guard's out. Rookie's a center. If I want to add to it, Neal, the right tackle, he got hurt late on the pick where he turned his ankle, so that wasn't a big factor. But they could not run the football. Saquon's out of there. They had 8 total handoffs. So San Francisco knows what they're trying to do the entire time with somebody who's not exactly built, Daniel Jones, even if you still have hope for him. He's not going to be a guy that's carrying you when all of these other things are down. I can't tell if they have wide receiver depth or if I can just name the wide receivers. And Darren Waller was terrible last night. The interception was a tip off of him. The 3rd and long that was late, it was a high throw. Everybody knew it was a high throw. But Waller at one point, and I don't know if it was because of the fantasy love, but you thought from a talent standpoint, because everything had finally worked out, some of the stuff we thought with the Raiders, like there were just too many plays that Waller was leaving out there. So that was a near impossible situation for even an average quarterback going up against the Niners and that defensive front. That again, all those dudes being healthy and Hargrave being in the mix now too, on top of Armstead and Bosa. It's just, it wasn't going to work. So why did I like it? Well, there was one play before the offsetting penalties on 3rd and 9, and I'm kind of noticing it throughout the night where he got flushed out of the pocket again immediately. Like everything that was planned, yeah, there's deep shots that were missed or whatever, but the deep shots, you know how hard those are when all of a sudden it's like you're actually not going to be able to set up here. It's not going to be clean in here. And I felt like that offsetting penalty play before they didn't convert the 3rd down. The 3rd and 9 that he had on it, where he flushed out, gave himself a chance and still made a throw and it was incomplete. It didn't really matter. I know that seems like the smallest thing, but there were moments last night where I was like, you know what? He knows it's a shit show out there, and he's trying to find a way to survive throughout it. And actually, the score was closer late. It never felt like Niners were actually going to lose that football game. I'm like, he's giving them a chance despite brutal conditions right now. 8 total handoffs, okay? They ran it for 29 yards. That's including the non-running back yardage in there from Tyrod and Daniel Jones, 2.6 yards per carry. So I know that I'm not supposed to give a quarterback credit after losing, all right? That's not really, you're not really allowed to. But I've thought he was just going to be bad. That I felt like last night was actually a positive, despite the score, despite the numbers, and despite how disconnected all of it looked. Purdy's now 8-0, third most wins to start a career undefeated. Roethlisberger, number 1 at 15. Mike Tomczak, 10 straight wins. And that's since 1970, because the NFL did this really weird thing where apparently once they rebranded it, none of the stuff ever matters before that. I don't really think that's cool. I'll bring it up from time to time, once or twice a year. I don't know if Purdy's good. We know that the reason he went last overall in the 22 draft, the 262nd pick, is because he's 6'1", 220, and the arm strength isn't there. When you watch Purdy games, look for those RPM throws outside the numbers. I don't see it. He may get it outside the numbers with some loft underneath it, but you're not going to see those just missiles. And it doesn't mean you have to have all that to be successful as a quarterback, as we've seen with Purdy here early on. He takes care of the football, 17 touchdowns, 4 pick split, 0 lost fumbles for his career, completing 67% of his passes, 8.1 yards per attempt. That's also because San Francisco's so good after the catch. Part of that is the talent. Part of that is the stuff that they run. He's been sacked only 6% of his dropbacks so far in his career. So is that O-line? No, it also might be on him because we know not all sack blame is created equal. Daniel Jones, so far this season, is being sacked on 11% of his dropbacks, and that number is going to get worse. The fact that he was even surviving last night was, again, part of the positive spin that I have for Jones on a Friday morning. Let's look at some other sack rates. Justin Fields, between 12 and 15% of his dropbacks through his 2+ years, including this year, third season in. So you get the point. Sack rate isn't everything, but at least with Purdy, we know he doesn't turn it over. We know he doesn't get sacked a lot. Could be O-line. It also could be him being smart about it. And the system that they run. They have an O-line. They have weapons. The McCaffrey trade, he is the absolute perfect weapon for them. I was wrong about them trading for McCaffrey. I didn't think he stayed healthy enough. And I'm like, wait, running back, and then you're moving a first rounder? Like, who would do this anymore? Well, they did it, and they knew what they were doing. And for Shanahan, the way they want to use him, even though they're letting him carry the football a lot more to start the year than I thought they would, and not using him in the receiving game as much. I think he was only ended up being like 20+ yards receiving last night. He's perfect for them. He's the perfect toy for Shanahan, and I was wrong. But I remember asking Bob Davie, used to coach at Notre Dame, had a few other stops, worked at ESPN. When I think about Shanahan and quarterbacks, I asked Bob Davie, I was like, would you rather be the best recruiter ever or the best coach ever? And he was like, are you kidding me? Best recruiter. Like, I'll figure it out. Just get him in the building. I think a lot of college coaches would agree with Davie. And I don't think this is the difference between an NFL and college coach. I think Shanahan's the opposite. I think he's like, I don't care. We'll just get a guy and we'll make this work. And that's why when I look at Shanahan, like in a weird way, I think Belichick later in his career post Brady was trying to do the Shanahan and he can't do it. And Shanahan's one of the very few people, maybe McVay. I don't know if it's Mike McDaniel, but I'm just fascinated by the fact that Purdy looks like he actually might be a guy that can do this a long time. And he, there's a reason why he went 262. And I think you see it throughout the games, but it doesn't seem to matter long term. The first half didn't look very good. I know the final numbers are pretty good there for Purdy, but I don't think we should have to trick ourselves into thinking like, hey, this guy's really awesome. I just think it's perfect for him. It was funny, even on the broadcast last night, they were talking about how Purdy was like, well, I want to go somewhere where at least I know I have a really strong chance at being the number 3 guy. And now Jimmy G's out, Lance is out. We wondered if we'd see Darnold at some point because that feels like another Shanahan thing where it's like, oh, give me the guy that's actually like physically talented. He's gotten beat up a bunch of different times, but get him in here. Like he is without question now. You know how there was like the Spurs way for the longest time in the NBA? If the Spurs got a player in there, you're like, oh, they'll figure it out there in San Antonio. That's how I feel about every single quarterback. Honestly, I might be open to the Kaepernick stuff now. Like, I don't know, with Shanahan, maybe they figure this out with a 7-year break in between snaps. So I've been a big motion guy the last week or so after that Miami-New England game. So I started looking back at last year going, what is it about the system? Not that motion solves all your problems or makes the non-motion teams bad, because the least amount of motion, if you go 22, ESPN Stats and Info had this last year. They took every regular season game and the playoff game. So there's a little variance there depending on which teams we're talking about. But Miami was number one in motion at the snap. There's motion and then motion at the snap. Miami is off the charts doing this more than everybody else in the NFL. Like 46% of their 22 into the playoffs snaps were snap with motion. And then pre-snap, it's like something like 70%. So where does San Francisco fall into this? Well, nobody's even close to what Miami did last year. And I think it's probably holding up this year as well. San Francisco was number 6 on the snap, number 2 pre-snap, all of it combined in there. And like I said, I mean, Philly and Cincinnati were in the bottom 6, so it doesn't mean if you just run motion all the time, you're going to be a really good football team. But clearly in Shanahan's system, and specifically to what Miami and San Francisco do, when you have toys like Tyreek Hill and McCaffrey, it stresses your defense. It stresses your defense into thinking about things that are moving around, flying around. So it is a little bit different. I mean, New York tried to send everything at Purdy last night. They blitzed on 86% of his, or 85%, excuse me. Not that any of you were going to freak out about that, but you never know. Martindale and that defensive unit sent a blitz on 85% of his dropbacks. That's the highest ever blitz ratio that we've had tracked by next gen stats. And yet Purdy, I think a really good play was a full 0 blitz in the red zone. That throw to Kittle stumbles out of his break. The ball's not even close. It hits the dirt. It's probably more on Kittle. But the fact that Purdy doesn't take the sack there, I think is the point. That Shanahan knows, okay, I'm calling this up. Does he see it? Yes, he sees it. He knows he's got to get this ball out quickly. And that's always my fascination with the position, is that I don't know that we ever see that stuff enough on Saturday, or if we know whether or not that guy will be able to do that on Sunday. So I'm watching these two quarterbacks where I can totally figure out the Purdy story and then why it's working here and why I don't think it'd work out somewhere else. But I couldn't stop but help asking myself the question after it was over. Is like, wouldn't Daniel Jones just be better? He's better physically. He's better physically in every possible way. Now, again, this is really somebody would have to be in the room to go, okay, who processed stuff better? There was the stuff going around on Twitter of Daniel Jones looking at the defense and looking panicked. By the way, Daniel Jones looks like that when he looks back to his own sideline. So that's just kind of his face, but it was a funny tweet. But yeah, I was like, yeah, I bet you if Daniel Jones were playing in this right now, he would look every bit as good as Purdy, and he could probably get some of those deep shots out a little bit quicker than he does. Or maybe he's turnover prone and Purdy isn't, and Purdy's the better example of it. So it's something I will monitor. This isn't the best compliment I've ever given, but whatever quarterback tiers I would come up with if I just did Russillo QB tiers, the tier for Jones would be he might not suck tier.